Hi, I'm Rick. It's Wednesday, May 14th, and what a day to be David Zaslav, huh? Uh, there's a lot of stuff in the news today. Really, the one that's catching everybody's attention is the fact that Warner Brothers Discovery has announced that Max is now being rebranded again back to HBO Max. And there's been a lot of, as you can imagine, mocking of the whole idea. David Zaslav doesn't have the particularly best reputation in Hollywood in general, and this certainly isn't helping things. Really sort of two things I wanted to touch on. Number one of which is if they were going to rebrand, and clearly they wanted to, HBO Max is the only one that made sense. You can't do HBO by itself, which is what I have been reading a lot of people speculating was going to happen, because there's more than HBO on the HBO material on the streamer. And what do you do with stuff that's produced for Max? You can't call it an HBO original because it's not on the linear network. But it's clearly not an HBO show. So HBO Max really was the only way to do this. All of this does point to the fact that this whole Warner Brothers Discovery saga is arguably the worst merger in entertainment history, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, the Time Warner AOL one was pretty bad, but I think this one was ill-conceived. It has been badly executed. It was based on premises which turned out to not be true at all. And both CEO David Zaslav and his main advisor, John Malone, have spent a lot of time trying to ignore the obvious issues with the whole merger. And now they're getting ready to essentially split the company back into two parts, apparently, pretty close to what it was before it merged. Now, really, what happened was that, Zaslav and Malone saw this merger as just another continuation of what Zaslav has been doing over the last 15 years. You take a couple companies, you roll them together, you build a big one, then you find another one, you roll that in together, and there's this whole idea that it's scale, right? You save money, it's more efficient, blah blah blah, which is almost never the case, particularly in media companies. Yes, you do save some money because you get to can half of the sales staff and half of the PR people, half of the marketing people at the new company, but it doesn't actually make anything more efficient. And in some ways, a larger company makes things more difficult in the media industry. And I think Warner Brothers Discovery is a really perfect example of that. They have two businesses which really don't fit together. There's this linear business, which is declining, but is still a business throwing off a lot of revenue. And then you have this not linear business. The HBO Max, the Warner Brothers Studio stuff, all that, and then HBO, which is the one linear asset that is really prized and is probably going to end up with the non-linear network stuff. You're going to have the Warner Brothers Studio Max and HBO on one side, and then you're going to have all the linear networks, along with Discovery Plus, that streaming platform which no one seems to remember, and in which David Zaslav has tried to get rid of literally since before the merger happened, and wasn't able to do it. That's all going to be another part. It's not really clear what's going to happen with some of the old Time Warner owned linear networks, TNT, TBS, and True TV, etc., because those have sports assets that they're going to want to hold on to. A lot of confusion, but really gets down to the point this merger never had to happen. It was a bad idea. Those old linear networks were doing fine. Yeah, they would be doing less fine now, but they wouldn't have blown through all this money trying to lower their debt level. You know, and really, I guess my bottom line with all this, and if I'm ranting a little bit, I'm sorry, it irritates me. They took a bunch of debt from rolling up in companies in previous mergers, combined it in this new company. They basically gutted spending in Warner Brothers Discovery, trying to lower this debt level. Um, in hopes, I guess, that they were going to sell it off. I don't know what it is. They still have a substantial amount of debt, which they have to figure out before they do anything else. And this has all been done really in the service of putting money in the pockets of some investors and executives. It certainly hasn't made the companies any stronger, hasn't made them any more efficient, hasn't made them more able to face the challenges that are they're going on in the industry, right? They're not the biggest successes Max has for the most part are HBO shows. Their ability to develop stuff, they have developed some new shows, but they haven't spent nearly the money that they should have. They haven't marketed the things nearly the way they should have. And but it's all because they're strapped. They're strapped for capital. They're trying to pay down this debt. They've spent a lot less money on the linear side than really they needed to in the last several years. Because even David Zaslav in interviews has said, "Oh, we can make half the shows that we're making now, and no one will notice." Here, they will notice. They do notice, and really, this is going to end up with the company being split into two parts. Zaslav and Malone and all these people will walk away with a bunch of money for screwing up two perfectly fine businesses. And this isn't that David Zaslav isn't a smart executive. It's that I'll give you an example. Back when I was doing financial reporting, I used to talk to this guy who was a market strategist at Cantor Fitzgerald. Um, and he always used to tell me the problem with most CEOs is they don't know what they don't know, right? They went with their gut for a lot of years. They made decisions which turned out okay, and they just don't see the train coming because it's not something they've had to deal with before. And I think that's really the case with David Zaslav and with John Malone, who I think he is responsible for a lot of these ill-advised decisions that have been made in the last couple of years. And so, but you know what? They're going to be rewarded for it. So obviously, it doesn't matter. They're going to walk away with hundreds of millions of dollars. You're going to end up with two companies that aren't as strong as they would have been by themselves, and Hollywood and everybody else suffers for it. So, hey, happy Wednesday, and make sure you you tune into the HBO Max. And what a day! All right, I will. I'll have more about this in the newsletter tonight. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.